Welcome to another episode of Dad Up, everyone. Thank you guys very much for joining me. It is about time I've had this dude on my show because he and I have been connected for quite a while. I guess you could call us social media friends. Even though we've never met, we just live a couple cities away from each other. One of these days we'll get a chance to meet, but I'm really excited to have him on because he's got a fascinating journey, a fascinating story that I want him to share with all of you. And he's also a dad. So we'll dive into all that stuff. But my good friend, Mr. Casey Diaz, is joining me on Dad Up. Welcome to the show, my brother.
Hey man, thank you so much for having me on Dad Up, and you got to be a dad to be on your podcast, so I'm qualified.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome. I'm really excited for this because, I mean, shoot, it's been a few years since you and I have really been connected on social media, following each other and following each other's story and all that kind of stuff, and the stuff you're doing and your journey as a dad and the stuff you've done in your life is fascinating. So, I mean, obviously you've got a podcast as well. So let's just kind of dive in. Let's get going. I mean, let's rock it. Let's start off with kind of your journey, how you grew up and the stuff you got into and all this, where it's led you to where you are today. And then obviously this is a parenting podcast, so I want to know about your family as well.
Yeah, so grew up in Los Angeles, in what's considered the Rampart District of LA. Pretty rough neighborhood, but when I was a kid down in the MacArthur Park area, it wasn't bad because it was the '70s still, and MacArthur Park was still it was clean. I know that a lot of people that are familiar with LA can't see that.
Right.
You had to live it, right? But it was a clean park. There was hardly any. I don't remember as a kid seeing homelessness there. It was iconic to that sandwich spot on Alvarado. So it's it was clean. It was still nice until it wasn't. The '80s kind of came in and ruined all that. But I had a normal childhood in the beginning, in the sense of going outside and playing. I still remember bikes being outside out of our apartment buildings. They weren't being stolen yet. you know, so we kids still played outside and we had fun, man. We played ball and all kinds of stuff that little kids get involved in. The only element for me that was different, and I thought it was an isolated situation that with my father, that he was very violent, uh, heavy drinker. Uh, didn't know that he was dealing drugs outside of the house. Uh, Eventually, we found that out. But a very violent guy, and so my childhood, it was almost like we saw the violence. I saw the violence inside my apartment, but then when I came out of my apartment, you have to put this face on that everything's normal,
Mm.
and it really wasn't. And I think a lot of kids, uh, even today, have to deal with stuff like that,
Mm.
in their households. It's a sad situation, but I mean, having lived through that, you learn a lot. You learn a lot, and I think this is one of the reasons that later on in my life, as a dad, I had a commitment to myself, to the Lord, to myself, and to my family, that there are certain things that I just won't allow in the house. But it was. I attended Hoover Elementary School, had fun there, man. I had a lot of fun there. Uh, those were my innocent years, and then at 11 is when everything kind of started to spiral out of control with me getting involved in a local gang,
Mm.
and that was the beginning of a lot of stuff that I wish uh, I would have never been involved in
Mm.
the first place.
Mm.
But we learned through the process of growing up, right?
Yeah. I think that your involvement in a gang at a very basically preteen, getting involved in a gang was really your search for a close family. I think that's what you were looking for because your home life wasn't the best. You know, your dad wasn't the greatest of role models to be around, and probably, I mean, like you said, you were in your home and it was violent, yet you stepped your foot out of the home and it was, you know, had freedom and you had happiness, you had joy. You like to go to school, you like to do those things with your friends, you like to ride bikes, all that kind of stuff because you weren't around that violent atmosphere. And finding a, you know, they say that, you know, kids that get in, I mean, you know, this, kids that get involved in gangs typically come from those types of homes where they don't like to be around. They don't want to, they want to be in the home because they don't want anything happening to them or their family. So they have to search for that family outside of the home that makes them feel loved and makes them feel wanted and makes them feel like they're part of a part of something. And I think that's probably what the gang was for you. Um, Obviously that wasn't the best of choices either, but you didn't know that. You're 11, right? You didn't know that. You just thought you were this was just some friends that you were, you know, that were accepting you and loved on you and cared about you when really they didn't, right? I mean, it was really just an external battle that you were facing that you had to figure out. What was that process like as you grew up into your early teens? Because now you know you're 11, but how long were you in the gang, Casey, and what helped you or how did you figure your way out of it?
I was involved in the gangs until early 20s is when I had an encounter that would change you know everything about my life.
Can you talk
But
about it?
yeah, yeah, I ended up in from 11 years old, man. I was in juvenile halls, uh, left and right. East Lake Juvenile Hall, Silmar Juvenile Hall, Los Padrinos. Did time in county probation camps. So I went through the whole channel of incarceration from very early on. Started getting kicked out of every junior high. Now that's called middle school, but back then I know that you remember it was called junior high, right? Um, I don't know. I went through maybe 6, 7 junior highs, I think,
Mm.
and about the same amount of high schools, and eventually into continuation school. And then at 16 is when I committed a very heinous crime. It was gang related, and it was on a moment that, in all actuality, I wasn't looking for trouble at that particular day. I
Mm.
was just waiting for somebody, and a rival gang came in to a little restaurant that I was in. Fight ensued, and I ran out to a stolen car that I had outside, and in that stolen car was a sawed-off shotgun,
Mm.
and a young man from a rival gang, his life would end.
Mm.
Uh, and then I'd end up, running away from law enforcement. I was able to stay out for 21 days before I got captured,
Mm.
and then uh, got, a first taste of, wow, this could potentially put me in for the rest of my life. And and even, and I want to tell you this, I didn't care. I didn't. There was not a cinch of remorse at
Mm.
that moment. There was no. I absolutely did not care for human life. I didn't care about anything. I was just about this gang life. I was sold some goods that were actually not good.
Mm.
And you're right. Going back to your statement about, you know, you go to the streets because the streets offer you a sense of security, a sense of family and belonging,
Mhm.
and you have the pat on the back that you've been looking for.
Mhm.
The streets validate you, the gang validates you, and you just think that you've arrived. And like any teenager, right? Teenagers have figured life out. They just know it all, right? And that's where I was. Uh, but my spin was that I just kept getting involved in violent crime and violent crime and violent crime all the way through. And then while I was in what's called the SHU program, in solitary confinement at New Folsom is where I would encounter a young, a very not young, a very small Baptist lady by the name of Frances, and she would approach my cell for the very first time, and and would start to talk to me about Jesus, and I didn't want nothing to do with that. I initially, pushed her off, didn't want, and I told her, I was very frank with her. I don't believe in any of that. Don't come over here with that. Not interested. But what came out of her mouth was this phrase. She said, "I'm going to put you on my hit list," and
Oh,
that is a very colorful word
right.
to use in a correctional
Especially with a gang member.
with a gang leader, right? Yeah, you're going to put me in what? And there was no fear in this little lady. She was from Louisiana, no fear at all. I mean, however God built her, He forgot to put fear in her because this lady didn't care who I was, didn't care where she was, and she said, I'm gonna put you on my prayer hit list because Jesus loves you and He's gonna use you." And she could have just said that in Japanese because I didn't understand any of that message.
Right.
But time took place, and I would encounter a situation in my cell that just incredibly turned my heart around. And I gave my life to Christ and became a Christian, and a hit was put on my life for doing so. So I had to endure some hard times, some hardship for doing that.
Hmm.
I was jumped so many times. I stopped counting at 27, and when you're getting jumped by, you're in a maximum security prison,
Right.
and they want to shred you to pieces, man. They want to make an example out of you.
Right.
These are dudes that are doing life. These are guys that have nothing to lose, and it was like a game for them, And I understood. I understood prison politics and what needed to be done to me because I walked away. But there was a commitment inside inside my heart, and I knew that something had changed, and I was willing to die for my newfound faith,
Hmm.
and there was a problem with that. So that was what took place in that cell, and I've been living as a believer ever since.
Wow. Um, that's crazy. I mean, that's absolutely crazy. I think it's remarkable the way that I mean, here you are, a young kid, and locked up in prison, and you find Jesus. You start to develop this relationship with Jesus, and the devil seems to find his way into you by through the means of abuse from other guys, right? These uh, you called it being jumped. I mean, these beat downs that you were taking from other people. I'm a firm believer in Jesus, and I think that these beat downs were just the devil just saying, no, he's not going to get a hold of you because you were part of me. You were part of my life. The devil is saying you were part of my life when you were in these gangs, when you were committing these crimes. You were a part of my life, and I won you over. And now that Jesus has taken you from me, so I'm going to make you pay for it. And I think that's how he did it, was through means of other people giving you these beat downs and jumping on you. And like you said, it was you were willing to take that to make that sacrifice. You were willing to take that punishment because nothing was going to sway your heart. Nothing was going to sway how you were feeling, and nothing was going to sway how you were committed to this newfound relationship with the Lord. And I think that's fascinating. I really, really commend you for sticking with that because there's a lot of guys out there, that might be in these situations where they're incarcerated and they've just become, introduced to the Lord, and they start to endure these various punishments or getting reprimanded for it, and they just find it easier just to turn back to their old ways. It's like, what's the point? I don't want to keep getting, jumped or being reprimanded because of this relationship that I found with Jesus. So I might as well just go back to my old ways and, hook up with a gang that's here in prison and
Yeah.
do what I need to do here. because it makes no sense. And you didn't do that. And I think that's awesome. Um, you know, before we dive into your family a little bit, I want to find out, what was that journey like? What was your relationship like with your parents as you were going through, your time with this gang and you were getting into trouble, finding your way in and out of juvenile hall, and then eventually ended up in prison? What was your relationship like with your parents, or was there any?
My mom, there was definitely a relationship with my mom. As an adult now, I look back and I put her through some difficult situations that I wish, again, I would have never put her through that.
Mm.
As a parent, man, your heart aches, and I can't even believe it, can't begin to imagine the pain and the suffering and all of that, all these emotions of seeing your firstborn child be so reckless, so defiant, so just full of hatred and anger,
Mm.
and still stick with me throughout the whole time. She was in courts, multiple time in courts. Uh, Man, she was there throughout the trial. Just she saw the worst of the worst in me,
Mm.
and still had this enormous love towards me, and she wasn't going to throw me away. That's huge. That's huge. And with my dad, it was never a relationship, where he came and visited or anything like that. In fact, she wasn't able to visit me at all throughout
Mm.
my time there when I was sentenced as an adult. Uh, the prison was too far. She didn't have a car, so I didn't see my mom throughout my whole entire sentence.
Mm.
No visits for me. And to be frank with you, I didn't want any visits.
Yeah, I didn't think you'd want visits from her, especially with that kind of relationship with your mom and how much she,
Yeah,
you're her firstborn and she has this love for you and you didn't want to disappoint her any more than you already have by having her come and see you in the condition that you're in the environment that you're in. And I
yeah,
think that was your way of protecting her.
yeah. And I just wanted to do, and also I wanted to do my time. I got myself in there. I just wanted, I didn't want anyone else to go through it.
Mm.
And then visiting areas, where you're seeing your loved one walk away and you remain. I didn't want to go through that whole emotional roller coaster
Right.
that I, played over and over in my head. So I rather just not have visits. So it worked out in that sense. But we rode in each other and we talked over the phone from time to time. Collect calls are very expensive. So I try to do like one call a month, if that.
Right.
Uh, you know, she was a seamstress, so she wasn't making all that much to begin with, and then adding to all the drama that I'm dragging her through. I didn't want to be another addition of a bill for her, and I know she didn't mind, but I just I wanted to do my time by myself and just shut the world off. When I first went in there, I was still active as a gang leader, and so I was doing a bunch of dirt. I mean, just incredible a bunch of dirt that I'm not proud of. And that's how I lived. And when I gave my life to the Lord, I thought for sure that the people that were as close to me, like my mom, that knew me, would run to Christ after finding out the news that this guy had come to Christ. That I had opened my heart, that God had opened my heart, and I was receptive to salvation. I thought, man, I'm going to tell my mom, and she's going to come to Christ within seconds of me telling her, and that wasn't the case.
Mm.
She didn't come to Christ until 7 years after I got out. And it was the right time. It was the right time and the right place and the right moment for her to come to Christ. So, for those of your listeners and your viewers from your podcast, don't lose hope in your family members. Uh, it's on God's time, and we got to be patient and understand that it's a personal relationship.
Mhm.
So it's when God calls that those family members will answer that call to come to him.
Yeah. I think that's awesome. Let's talk about your family, Casey. I mean, how many kids do you have?
I got three.
Three kids. What are their ages?
So I got a 24-year-old Sam, which is my firstborn Samantha, and then my 23-year-old Mia, and then I have a 16-year-old son that's still at home.
Oh, awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
And how's your relationship with them and your journey with them? I think that, for the experiences that you've had, I know for me personally with my, I got two boys, as you know, they're older, they're 26 and 23. And I think for me as a dad, the experiences, we gain a lot of our experiences on how to be a parent based on number one, the viewing of other parents around us, meaning seeing other adults that interact with their kids.
Yeah.
That's where we learn. Number two, our own experiences growing up, right? How we experience life and how we experienced our own parents. And then number three, how we experience essentially as we've grown up and start to get into that adulthood, how we experience our surroundings, meaning our not only our own family, but others around us as well. And I think for me, it was I didn't have a bad childhood. I wasn't a troublemaker. I wasn't into gangs or any of that kind of stuff. I was actually more afraid of my dad than anything else. So I always tried to do good by him. But he wasn't really involved. My parents weren't involved in my life. I mean, they were to this day they're still married. To this day they're still they're still together, and I still talk to them, and I have a good relationship with them. But they just weren't around. They worked. They were blue collar workers. My mom at one time. Oh, I lost your video there,
Well,
Casey.
oh man, let me hold on one second.
There
There we
you
go. Sorry about
go.
that.
My mom at one time had three jobs that to make ends meet, and it was just a lot of times in the evening time it was just me and my sister. I'd have to make dinner for us, and when I played sports, my parents they just couldn't come to my games. They just couldn't do it because they were working and stuff. And so I knew at a very early age that when I had boys, I wasn't going to be that way. So that was my experience. My experience shaped who I was as a parent. That was my point. So, based on you and how you grew up and your experiences as you grew up, I'm sure it shaped who you are as a parent. You knew that rough life that you went through, and you knew that, gangs and getting into trouble and all that kind of stuff was not the path that you were going to have for your kids. You just knew that because you didn't like that experience yourself. So, you certainly weren't going to have your kids go through that. So how did that translate with you raising your kids? In other words, what did you teach them as a parent about your experiences to help prevent them from going down the same road?
It's interesting that you mentioned, the lack of involvement that you experienced, right? So that was one of the things that, when you have blue collar parents, they work long hours. They get up very early in the morning. They're out very late, and they're not able to. A lot of times, they're just trying to make it, man.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't understand that as kids, but they're just trying to make it. And I've seen families now, that are just trying to make it, and so it's hard for them to attend games and dramas at their school or whatever the case is, right? So for me, I was tremendously blessed in that we owned a sign company at the time that we started having kids. And as a business owner, I was, it was a small business. And I was, the perks of owning your own small business, it's not, you're not going to be driving a Lamborghini.
Right.
You're not going to have the nicest house on the block. What you're going to have, your perk is you're able to be at your kids' school events. That's really the perks, and having just a little bit more than the average person. But that's it, really. And so for me, I was able to attend everything that my kids were involved in their school. I was able to put them through private education from kinder all the way through universities. That was a blessing that God allowed my wife and I to provide that for them. And I knew that, the environment of a private education and what was being taught was going to help. You know, obviously, the best lecture and the best system is in the home. And what they see in the home is what they're going to take in life. The school and the church are bonuses.
Right.
It's what we live in the family structure. And they got to see a real marriage that was not perfect. They got to hear mom and dad argue about sometimes the dumbest things,
Right.
and other times where the fight was a little, a little louder, a little, But the thing that they also saw was that we stayed together and we made it work. We had a commitment to Christ to make it happen. Whether we liked each other or not at the moment, we have those, every person that's been married has had the hallway situation.
Right.
You're not talking and you're having to walk through the hallway,
Right.
and you don't want to look at each other, you want to
Right.
touch each other, right?
Excuse
They
me.
saw all of that.
Right.
They saw all of that. And I think that, even though it's not the greatest, it's a healthy marriage that we're having. And we still, man, what gave me hope, man, is her parents have been married for, I don't know, 60 something years. They're still married, right? And I remember my father-in-law having a argument with his wife after 50 years. And that, to me, that moment when I saw that, I went, wow,
Right.
it doesn't end. You still have,
You're normal.
but it's great. You have to tell yourself as a husband, as I'm committed to the Lord, and I'm committed to this woman that is my wife. I'm committed to my kids, and I'm not going to be a perfect dad. I'm not going to be a perfect husband, but I'm going to try my best, and I'm going to fail miserably at times. And it's God's system, and it works. So I've had troubles with my kids, with one of them, with another one, just stuff, but nothing over the top stuff. My kids
Right.
serve the Lord, all of them, on their own. The girls are out of the house. Well, actually, one just came back because, and this is a great sign, if your adult daughter or son wants to come back for one more year before they get married, that is a great sign. My oldest just got engaged, Sam, and she wanted to come back home for one more year to spend it with us before she gets married, because once she gets married, that's it. She's, with her husband and creating their family. So my wife and I are like just besides ourselves to have her at home one more last year, and and enjoy her single life for this moment.
Right. Right. I think that's cool. I really, really cool the way that you shared that story, especially with your older daughter coming back. I never even thought about that with my boys. My older son lives in Arizona. He's got a pretty serious girlfriend that lives out there. I don't see him coming back for one more year before they get engaged. I don't know when they're going to get engaged. Not, he tells us not anytime soon right now. We're still figuring this thing out, which is fine with
Yeah,
us. And
that's
then,
good.
yeah, and then my younger son, he lives at home, but he's just trying to save money because it's not cheap living in California, and he doesn't want to move anywhere else because he's got a pretty serious. They're actually talking about getting engaged this summer. But yeah, I mean it's pretty amazing when we give ourselves to our kids and show them what a healthy family life and relationship life looks like inside the home. It's amazing what they will do on their own when they are, flying the nest, right? When they're flying the coop and doing their own thing. And I mean, like I said, for me, I mean, I grew up, I was not a bad kid. I mean, like I said, I was more afraid of my dad than anything else, and I didn't want to disappoint him, and so I always tried to do good. Now, that didn't mean I didn't get into trouble. I did do some stuff that I shouldn't have done that I'm not proud of, but nothing to this, to the level of what you have endured in your life. But my boys knew that, if they went through life and they messed up or they made a mistake or they had these challenges or setbacks, which they did, um, regardless of how great our family structure or culture was, they still made mistakes. They still messed up. They always knew, because of my relationship with them, because of my wife's relationship with them, they always knew that they could trust us and count on us to help them through whatever struggle they're going through. And that's something that you, Casey, didn't have until you found your way into that gang life, right? With your parents, you didn't have that kind of structure where you could rely on them if you were going through something. You could go to them and hope that they would be by your side and help get you out. Your dad was more focused on what's the next hit he could make as far as his drug selling goes, or what's the next drug he could take as far as his abuse goes with his addiction. But for you, you're seeking that outside support to help get you through any challenges that you were facing, and you thought that was the way. You thought that was it. That was your life, and that was a healthy choice for you. And obviously, it wasn't. So, for your kids to see, I'm sure your kids know about your journey. I'm sure that's something that you probably don't hide from them. I wouldn't hide it from them if I was you. And I know that they understand with the relationship with the Lord that getting into that kind of world that you were part of is not something that the Lord would want them to go or want them to do. So I commend you and I commend your wife for the level of commitment that you guys have given, not only to yourselves, but to the Lord and to your family, your kids in particular, because it's important. Life's hard. Life's challenging. We all have struggles, whether you're in a gang or not. We all have struggles. We all have challenges. We all face adversity. We all face heartache. We all face sadness. And
Loss.
yeah, we all face loss. And it depends on how well you're willing to get up and keep moving forward, and how well you're willing to rely on your loved ones around you and rely on prayer to get you through those circumstances that really make who you are as an individual. And for Casey, and the stuff that he's gone through and the stuff that he's endured as a young man, for him to come out on the other side is unique. It's unusual. A lot of his friends are either dead or still incarcerated, and he chose not that path because of his discovery of his relationship with the Lord and what that really meant. And it's his testament to the way his kids are now and their relationship with the Lord. And I think it's remarkable. And I think that's why I wanted to have you on, because I know that that journey that you went through and who you are today is something to be commended. But not only that, Casey, it's something to be very proud of. And I'm sure you are very proud of that. Um, I wanted to give you an opportunity though, because this is about you and about your journey. If my listeners or viewers wanted to look you up and learn a little bit more about you, what's the best places for them to do that?
They could go on my website, kcdiaz.net. They can find me on Instagram, Real Casey Diaz. And the book. If you haven't got a copy of the book, it's called The Shot Caller. It just goes into my whole entire life story in detail. It's what's so cool is we're seeing this book being asked all
Mm,
over prisons and juvenile halls across America.
mm,
And one problem that we're having is getting support, because there's no way I can fund that many copies to give away to these prisons.
mm.
We get emails every week, nonstop, for this book to be in the hands of inmates. And the thing is, these inmates, because a lot of them are in gangs, they're active gang members and leaders. They're not going to read a Bible, but
Right,
they will read a book where the title says Shot Caller, because
right.
that's going to kind of spark interest. And my prayer has always been that this book would be a stepping stone for them to grab a hold of a Bible and a relationship with Christ. That's the thing. But the requests come constantly throughout the weeks, and there's no way I could do it. So, the support is always needed. But I mean, they could find me in all over the place, and they're doing a motion picture film about the book and my story. They already have a director, and Zero Gravity is behind the whole project. Just what God has done, those words from Francis Proctor, Jesus loves you and is going to use you. It's incredible what this lady spoke many, many years ago, and seeing it come to pass. I'm going into prisons left and right now in my journey for the past year and a half, and visiting prisoners and giving them the gospel. So it's an incredible time to be alive and to see God's hand work, through men that have been discarded, and rightly so on some, that you commit a crime, you belong in prison, but there's also still redemption and a second chance that God continually gives to everyone that's born under him, right? That's just how God works.
Yeah. Well, I think that's awesome. Good for you, Casey. I'm really proud of you, buddy. I'm really excited to continue to watch your journey. And I'm looking forward to, hey, we are just a couple cities away from each other. I'm in the Inland Empire. You're in Los Angeles. I mean, we're just a couple cities away from each other. So one of these days we're going to meet up and we're going to break some bread together and really develop this friendship a little bit more, because you're somebody that is truly inspirational, and I'm looking forward to continuing that relationship, my friend.
Oh man, I'd love to do that, man. Let's make it happen. It's put a date on it, and let's do it.
Cool. Let's do it. Listen, guys, this has been another episode of Dad Up. I want to thank my good friend, Mr. Casey Diaz, for being on my show. Make sure you guys check out his website. You can get his book, learn a little bit more about the shot caller himself, and find out exactly how his story went down. But I'm really excited for his journey, and you can check out all his links in the show notes below. And listen, subscribe to his podcast. He's got an amazing podcast, and he shares a little bit more about his journey through his podcast. So you can definitely do that there. And if you are not yet subscribed to my show, I don't know why you're not, but if you aren't, please make sure you do that so you don't miss any of the awesome guests that I have on each and every week. And as always, I look forward to seeing you all on the next episode of Dad Up. Wow, another amazing episode in the books. So much was shared, and I'm truly grateful my guest was able to pour into you to help you elevate your dad game and really dad up. Make sure you bang that subscribe button so you don't miss a single episode. And while you're here, please don't forget to leave me a rating and a review. I always appreciate the feedback. And one last thing, don't forget, your role as a dad is one of the most important roles you have. So if you need a little help or have questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me on my website at daduptribe.com or at my Instagram page at Dad Up Podcast. Until next time, everyone, Dad Up.